What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the video. Introduction to Entity Framework Core. And we will begin with an introduction. Then we will talk about the three approaches suggested by Microsoft. Then the definitions which are necessary to understand and work with the Entity Framework Core, the version history, and the conclusion which sums up our discussion on the Entity Framework Core. So, the introduction. Entity Framework Core is a data access technology from Microsoft and it is available in the form of a NuGet package. So you need to download this and then you can start working with it. So originally the name was Entity Framework, then they changed it to Entity Framework Core when the name of the framework itself changed. So the name of the framework was changed from .NET Framework to .NET Core with the starting of .NET Core 1.0. When developers don't want to work with queries, they use the entity framework. So this is the job of entity framework, that we don't have to worry about writing long queries. We can just use this interface to interact with our database. So don't get confused. There are a lot of people on the internet talking about what approaches to take with the entity framework. Note that there are only three approaches which are suggested officially by Microsoft. The first one is DB first approach, in which you create a database and then you work with entity framework, which creates your C sharp code to interact with the database. The second one is do it yourself. We will talk about it later. The third one is code first approach, in which you create C sharp classes which are called models, which helps you to create database based on those models. So this is a screenshot from a Microsoft article. So it suggests that the entity framework supports these approaches. So generate a model from an existing database. So this is the DB first approach. They are saying that you have an existing database and you can generate a model from it. So you can generate your C sharp models from an existing database. That is DB first approach. The third one is once a model is created, use entity framework migration to create database from the models. So they are saying that the model is created, the code is done, so the C sharp models are created. You can then choose to create a database based on these models. So this is code first approach. The second point is hand code a model to match the database. It means that you don't have a database and you don't have C sharp models. So what you do is you create all the C sharp models and then you create all the database and tables which matches those models and do everything by yourself. So this is not an official name for this approach, but based on the fact that we have to do everything and entity framework won't do anything automatically, I named it do it yourself. So previously, when the entity framework core was just called entity framework, there was another approach, and using that approach, we had a UI which created both the database and C sharp models for us. That approach is no longer supported by Microsoft, so it is gone. Now with the entity framework core, we only have these three approaches. So talking about database approach in details, you already have a database with tables and relation, then you can use this approach. This will create all needed models, so the C sharp classes for you to work with. With the code first approach, you have to create the models first. So the C sharp classes are made first according to what you want to have within the database. You will need to do migration to create the database tables and relations on the server. So basically, you create C sharp classes, and based on the classes, the entity framework creates your database on the server. And the third approach, we don't have to talk about that because in that approach, you create the models and you create the database and then you use the entity framework. So nothing is created automatically. So now some definitions. The DB context. This is an entry point which is used as a manager and it performs all the operations on your database. So it's like a manager. You talk to DB context that I want to perform an insert operation. It will perform the insert operation. You can say that I want to get all of the employees or whatever is within your database. So you want to get all of them. So you can talk to the DB context. It is designed to perform only a single action and it should be disposed after that. So this is a suggestion from the Microsoft. Now the DB set. DB sets are the representation of the tables within your C sharp code. So imagine you have three tables in your database that you want to work with in your application. So based on those three tables, we will create 3 DB set in our C sharp code. We keep all DB sets inside the DB context class. So we can use the DB context class to access the database. DB sets are interface which let us perform CRUD on specific tables. So basically, we perform all the operations using the DB context, but DB sets to identify that we want to perform the CRUD operation on this specific table. So this is the job of DB sets. So basically, in database we have tables, and in in C sharp code we have DB set. We also have entity. So it refers to a table. So usually it refers to a table. In context to the entity framework in which we are working with code, entity are classes that maps to the database table. So entity are classes which are the mirror image of the database tables in our code. Now the database transfer object. This object defines how the data will be sent over the network. So this is a general concept not entirely related to the entity framework, but when we are using the entity framework, it is necessary that we don't use the entity classes to transfer data between requests. So in web API, to retrieve data at the end of any response, we need a response object which responds back to the request. Here we cannot use entity classes, so we create DTOs. In HTTP post request, where we have data, we need C sharp object to contain that data, then insert or update the data. So we use DTO for that. So in a post request, inside the post request body, we have data that we receive in the form of C sharp object, which are parameters. So we receive the data inside parameters of the C sharp method. We can't use entity classes, so we need data transfer objects for that. This is actually not a hard concept, but it may be difficult to understand. But when you watch the video that actually implements the DTOs, they are very easy thing to do. Now, this is the version history of the entity core. It started with 1.0, 1.1. So you can see that these version matches the versions from .NET Core. So the first version of .NET Core was 1.0. Then these version came, and then there was no .NET Core 4.0. They released .NET 5.0. So this relates to that. And then .NET 6, 7 and 8 was released. So this is a future update. This hasn't released yet. This will be released with the .NET 9. Similarly, with the classic entity framework, this was the version history. So the first entity framework came with .NET 3.5. Then these version came, and I know that there is no .NET framework 5.0. So these versions are not related to the versioning of .NET. But this was the last version, and then the entity framework core started to work. So the entity framework life cycle has been ended, and the entity framework core is still being maintained. So now the conclusion, entity framework is just a technology that make your life easier by communicating the database without having to write any queries. It has changed a lot over time, just as the .NET itself. So the .NET has also evolved a lot over the time. And there is a very good article that suggests that when to use entity framework in your workplace. So if you are confused that if you want to use entity framework in your project, then this is the best article to read. It will help you decide that what you want to choose. So this is all for the video. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and do subscribe to the channel. See you next time.